Hi there, welcome to the Spark Changemakers podcast. It's great to have you with us. Today, we'll be talking about changemaking and empathy, something that I believe is such a vital skill that it should be front and center in every school curriculum and workplace training program, particularly as technology continues to play an increasingly important role in the world. It's a real honor to be joined today by the absolute changemaker and creative genius, I would say, Ed Kirwan. Previously a science teacher and head of chemistry in North London, Ed entered the world of storytelling and filmmaking in 2018. In 2020, he launched Empathy Week, a festival of film, storytelling, and events for schools that develops the skill of empathy in students aged 5 to 18. In 5 years, the festival has reached over 1.3 million students across 50 plus countries and 6 continents with a mission to build the hashtag empathy generation. Through research with Cambridge University, Ed's team and others have shown that empathy is a teachable skill and recently that it improves behaviour as well. In May 2024, Ed launched Empathy Studios, an education and creative studio which now continues to develop their award-winning and research-backed empathy programme, which has engaged 175,000 students in 4 years. He believes that empathy is the most essential human skill. We must teach it now and embed it into the education of all, and I couldn't agree more. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you very much. What an intro. Thank you so
It's
much.
fantastic. I mean, what an incredible amount of work you've been doing. So tell us, let's start right at the beginning. Why
Mm,
empathy and why film? How did you get started in all of this?
gosh, yeah, I don't know how long we've got, but I guess the why empathy and why film. Empathy, I think it's the most foundational, fundamental skill for success, happiness, productivity, whatever you want to achieve in life. Empathy will have a role in doing that. I truly believe that. And I believe it as a foundational skill. So when you're talking about leadership or creativity, um, uh, connecting with others, communicating. Empathy is the foundation. You can't have those great skills without a level of empathy. And then why film? I think film is just everyone's got a favorite film or has multiple favorite films. I think film can take you in a couple of moments or a couple of minutes to a completely different emotional state. I think that is the power of film. You could be having a completely terrible day, watch something so inspiring that it puts your own life into perspective. And I think perspective is probably the key part of film. It opens our world. And I think it's just so powerful. And it's now readily accessible. What used to be something that maybe 40, 50 years ago, you went to the cinema and you went maybe once in a blue moon, and some places never had cinemas. Now is readily, you watch something every day. Probably one of the first things you do in the morning is watch something. So I think film is just an incredibly powerful way to communicate messages. I think it's an incredibly powerful way to educate. And I think the world now is expecting to be entertained when you're educated. So it's a great way to match make the two. How did I start in all of this is a long story, but I guess teaching really opened my eyes to a lot of things. I taught in North London. Some would say a challenging school, I would say, or challenging kids, and I would say they're not challenging kids, they're kids with challenging situations. There's a big difference there. And I love teaching. I love the interaction. I love the banter, you could say. I'll admit, I was a better teacher of boys than girls, as my mentor told me. A lot of the times, there's always some funny stories, but there'd be like one where I was like, this young girl was probably 13, 14, was like, "Sir, can I go to the toilet?" "No, you can't go to the toilet, sit down." "Can I go to the toilet?" "No, you can't." And then like just after asking like 4 or 5 times, she just shouted out, "Sir, I'm on my period. I need to go to the toilet." And I was like, "Go, go, go, go,
It's the
go."
bombshell moment,
Yeah,
isn't it? You
yeah. I was just
can't do anything about that.
like, wasn't buying into the cues that she was, saying to me. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing about teaching is that every day is literally different.
Mm,
You laugh, you sometimes cry, um, but you that interaction with humans, and you meet every type of personality under the sun
mm,
teaching, um, across the whole spectrum of humans, and I think that's the amazing thing about it. And that's where I didn't call it empathy at the time. It was only sort of leaving teaching and then entering sort of into doing a bit of film work as sort of a hobby to start with that I noticed actually that's what I was doing. I was trying to empathize with my students. if you haven't done homework, why? Not because you, oh, I didn't have a pen. It's not, you didn't have a pen. Why didn't you
Mm,
do it? Where is the time that you weren't doing it? What don't you have access to? What's going on at home? And as soon as you start asking some questions that they feel happy to answer to, you start learning a lot about other people, and
mm,
it starts to give you reasons for certain types of behavior. Now, with negative behavior, things like fighting or some more serious behavior, there's never an excuse for it. I never excuse it. That we live in a society where there are punishments, crimes, and
yeah.
there's the force of law. But there is always, and I fundamentally always push this point, there is always a reason for behavior. And it might not be a reason that you can get on board with at all, but for that person, it's a reason that's led them to do that. And if
Mm,
you can understand those reasons, that is what can lead you to prevent that behavior in the first place, to build a connection, to bridge divides,
yeah.
and ultimately, it sounds it sounds massive, but world peace. Like,
Why not? Yeah, for
why
sure.
not? Honestly,
We need
just
that right now, don't we? I mean, come on.
100%. There is no truce. There is no treaty
Mm,
that doesn't involve some level of empathy.
yeah.
And the ones that, if you go back in history, I studied the Treaty of Versailles at school, wasn't a very good treaty because it actually fundamentally pushed people into, or pushed the Germans into World War II. But if you have a good treaty that understands both sides, that bridges the gap,
Mm,
and basically says we agree to disagree, but for the good of humanity, we are going to do this.
yeah.
Empathy is heavily involved in that process. So when we're talking about the fundamental skill of empathy, we are talking about a skill that is needed throughout life, is constantly needed to be developed because everything is changing around us. I always talk also about empathy as the skill to navigate change better.
That's interesting.
It's allowing you to realize that if you're working in a workplace, your colleagues don't stay constant for 10 years if they're there for 10 years. Just like in a romantic relationship, the person that you meet is not the same person that you met years ago. They change and
Mm,
adapt and grow. And then the difficulty is navigating that. And that's where
right.
sometimes arguments and changes occur. And if you've got kids, you'll know that they change quite rapidly. And so then all of a sudden they're into this TV show and then they're into that TV show. We are changing all the
Mm,
time. Empathy is that skill to, what I sometimes say, collect human data, see what is changing in that person, understand them, realize. And the more we understand each other, the more we can avoid conflict, or the more we can patch conflict up,
mm.
the more we can support each other. At the moment, I am editing like mad for a new set of films, and my fiance is very good at like understanding that I can't spend time with her in the evening because I have to edit these. And
Mm,
that's why we're together, because if she didn't understand that, she wouldn't be. But she's being very, very supportive
mm,
in that, understanding I'm under a lot of pressure at the moment. But she gets it. But at the start of our relationship, she wouldn't. She'd be like, why are you working so much? And so it's like empathy is like building that mutual understanding. And I think what's really interesting is that we're about to release a report that shows the sort of new research about empathy improving behavior, but we've also surveyed adults as well as students over the past 3 years. So we've surveyed 1,250 adults and students, sorry, and we've asked them lots of questions, but this one in particular is interesting, to rate themselves out of 5, how empathetic they are at work or school, how empathetic others are to them at work or school, and then how empathetic do you rate the world right now? So out of 5.
it's
So
interesting.
if you're listening, think about a number you'd give yourself, a number you'd
Mm,
give other people, a number you'd give the world. And what we've noticed is across the 1,250 people is that people rate themselves 11% higher in empathy than everyone
right.
else around them.
Yeah, that's super
That's
interesting. Yeah.
that's the fundamental problem, right? Everyone. And
Mm,
when I go into companies and I do keynotes or talks or conferences, especially when the company, they're all from the same company. Sometimes you have 100, I have the BBC, it had 100 people in the room, and they're all looking at each other because they're all colleagues. And actually, then I say, no, do you know what this number means? It means that look around you. Everyone that you're looking at thinks they're 11% on average more empathetic than you are. But you, looking back at them, think you're 11% more empathetic than them.
yeah.
And I always use the sort of example of driving. If any of you drive, You're always right in the car. It's always that
100%.
person.
Yeah.
I'm always right. I know I'm always right in the car. Beep, beep, what you do that idiot driving in there. You're always right, but you don't know there could have been an ambulance behind us. So it's just really interesting.
Mm,
And then we rate the world 33% less empathetic.
wow. I was going to say, I
So
can imagine that's certainly now because of what we're being fed, the sort of rhetoric at the minute that, the world is such a dangerous place and chaotic. I can
yeah.
imagine. Yeah.
Yet my experience of the world, having travelled
Mm,
quite a lot and been welcomed into homes, is that people are amazing, and that
yes.
99.999% of people will welcome you, want to show you their culture, look after you, help you,
Yeah.
and there is a proportion of bad people out there that will take advantage or try and harm you. But I've come across just amazing, amazing people. There's a great lady called Jodie Jackson who I'm connected to, and she does a lot of stuff around the news. And she says the news is not a reflection of what's going on in the world;
Mm,
it's a reflection of what's going wrong in the world.
that's
And
interesting.
that's such a nice way
Yes.
to phrase it, because there is just this, and don't get me wrong, there are some horrendous things happening,
Yeah.
but there are also some amazing things happening, and
Which we don't hear about.
which we don't hear
Yeah.
about because we have a negativity bias. We are
Yeah.
wired, if I go into the slight science of it, we are wired to pay attention to threats and danger more than other things. It's why we go on autopilot when we're about to get home. That 5 minute drive or 10 minute walk
Mm,
to getting home, we're almost in a trance like state because we know it, we know the paths, we know where some things are going wrong, where we might misstep or whatever, because our brain is kind of saving energy because we know that we're not under threat or we're really close to home. When you're in a new environment, I don't know if any of you have solo, if you're listening, solo traveled
mm.
and you land in a country on your own, even if you've got a phone these days, you have absolutely no idea. You may have looked at maps before. You have no idea where you're going. You're staring at the boards. Everyone's trying to sell you taxis. You're like, you've got your bag. You're clearly a tourist. You feel
Clinging to
very,
it. Yeah.
yeah, you feel very vulnerable.
Mm,
That's kind of that's the state that our brains go into
yeah.
when we see danger or perceive danger, and we have this bias towards negativity. So if the news was filled with 15 stories on the homepage that are all amazing things. We go,
Mm,
oh, bloody hell, oh, that's nice. And then we kind of also, I think maybe it's a bit of a reflection on our own perspective of our own life as well. Whereas actually, if you go onto sort of any news channel's website, their homepage will be filled maybe with 10 to 15 stories,
yeah.
of which 95% will be negative.
Yeah.
Maybe 10% might be neutral, maybe 1%. Sorry, one of them might be positive, but generally, sometimes they're just all negative.
Yeah.
So that's so overwhelming. So no wonder we think the world is not empathetic. But there's also a problem with that as well, that people mistake the word empathy for meaning kindness, and it's not.
That's interesting. So, what have you found in terms of that? So, the people's perception is that empathy is kindness.
People think empathy is, yeah, people equate empathy to being kind. They also equate it to helping people that are more in need than you are. And what people do is mix up sympathy, they mix up compassion, they mix up kindness, all wrapped into sort of
Mm,
these words that are interchangeable, and technically they're not. So empathy is the skill and ability to understand another person, and allow them to reveal their authentic self whilst reserving judgment. That is
that's
what
nice.
we define
Mm,
empathy as. There's nothing in there about being kind or whatever. Now, I talk about kindness, compassion, sympathy like cousins of
yes.
empathy. They're related and they interlink, but it's interesting if we want to use empathy as a skill for conflict and navigating that and navigating difference. Some people don't want to be kind to people they really disagree with.
Yeah.
Or like in extreme cases, if we look at the riots, if we talk about if empathy equals kindness, well, how do you say to those asylum seekers that are in these hotels in Rotherham that are being
Mm,
fearing their lives with then far right Nazis outside chucking bricks through their window? But yeah, empathy is what's needed on both sides. We
mm.
need to understand why people are chucking bricks.
Yeah. The drivers
Why
behind it.
what is under,
Yeah.
not that action, what is
Hmm.
underneath that? What is there? There's an amazing filmmaker called Dia Khan, who she has interviewed. She did an amazing post on Instagram, and I subsequently also did a post about her post because it was so good. And she interviewed jihadists and far right Nazis, And she said, here are some things to know about extremists. And it was to do with the fact that they feel not seen and not heard and not
Right.
understood.
Right.
Empathy is the skill to make someone feel seen, heard, and understood.
Yeah.
Like, this is why we need this skill to prevent. I always talk about empathy as both a vitamin and a painkiller.
I love
Vitamin,
that.
it can prevent things from happening. If we have empathy in society,
Yeah.
if we have empathy in our world and when I say society, I mean like our local society, a school culture or a work
Hmm.
culture. If we have empathy, it means, right, before I move into judgment, before I make a decision, I'm going to lead with understanding, curiosity. I'm going to find out reasons why this is happening
Yeah.
and then make a decision. And that means that you can actually connect better with people. If you're a leader, it doesn't mean you're soft. It still means you can go against the decision that someone isn't happy about. But if you lead with empathy, you've basically said, well, I want to hear your side. And then they can still give you their side. But when you listen to it, you can say, great, I can see where you're coming from. We're still going to make this decision. This is why.
Mm.
And then in a real serious way, if there's lots of like conflict and that person in an organization doesn't agree with it, then maybe they're the wrong fit for the organization. Empathy doesn't equal kindness. It doesn't equal softness. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Empathy is like the hardest skill
Yes.
to master, and in fact, it's
Right.
impossible to master. I'm always aware of people that say I'm overly empathetic, and I think again, what people mean by that is that they bring on other people's emotions
That's
well,
interesting.
and
Yes.
we call that often emotional contagion. So if
Mm.
you see someone cry, you also you cry and you get upset.
Mm.
But if we come back to empathy, meaning if there was a one word synonym for empathy, I'd say it was understanding.
Yes.
If you see someone cry and you cry, do you fully understand why they're crying? Do you fully
Yeah.
understand their emotions? So there's empathy is so
It's
can be so
multifaceted.
complex,
Yeah,
multifaceted. It's
definitely.
also nuanced, and I
Mm.
think that is a word that is missing from life today is nuance.
That's a really good point. Everything's black and white, isn't it? One pole to the other and
We
nothing in
live
the
we live
middle.
in the middle
Mm.
consistently, but
Yeah.
we like to box things because
Mm.
our brain likes to know, okay, this person's bad, this person's okay,
Yeah.
this is good, this is bad. And it's so much easier than going, oh, well, I can understand, imagine saying, oh, well, I can kind of understand why that person threw that brick at the, people go, "Oh my gosh, you're far right as well." No, no,
Mm.
no, no. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I can understand if I was not seen, heard, and understood,
Yeah.
and I there was already a sudden a riot, and I hate the government, I hate the police, I hate everything around me. I've been failed. Screw this. I'm going to join a mob because then all of a sudden I start to feel like I belong,
Right. There's a
and I
sense of
think
belonging. Yeah.
essentially everyone is looking for belonging,
Yeah.
and that's what takes so many people down negative routes. For young people, gangs,
Hmm.
there is a strong element of feeling wanted, needed, and that's why gangs will prey on children and young people that need
Yeah.
love.
Yeah. They're vulnerable in some way. And
Yeah.
yeah, there's a connection there.
So yeah, empathy. Sorry, I'm going on one,
It's
but
fascinating. Yes.
empathy isn't kindness, but
Hmm.
it can make kindness better. So an example I always give there's two examples I give. One, I got into filmmaking a little bit around homelessness when I left teaching, and I just
Mm.
started picking up a camera and I did projects. And I walked into a Tesco, I saw a man outside a Tesco, walked inside, got a chicken meal sandwich deal, thought I'll do a good deed for the day. Came out, looked down, said, "Here you go, mate. Here's a meal deal, here's a chicken sandwich." He looks up at me and goes, "I don't eat meat." Now
Fail, fail.
I was like, what? In my head, I was like,
I've
beggars
done a
can't be
really good
choosers.
deal.
I've just
Yeah,
spent
yeah,
£3 on this.
yeah. Aren't I a good
Um,
person? All the rest of
yeah.
it.
And then I even had like a chocolate bar, and I said, and this is true. I had a chocolate bar. I said, "Oh, you can have that." I said, "Oh, I'm vegan." Like, and then I was like, really? I was like, "Oh my gosh, really?" And I kind of felt offended. Then I reflected on it so much, and I was like, I haven't even asked this man, does he want
Mm,
anything?
right.
I've just assumed.
Yeah.
I've then made the decision for him, and I've gone out, and then I said, and there is that a kind act? Yes.
Mm,
But has it been received in the way that I wanted it to?
right.
No. So kindness is sometimes, I say often, not it doesn't matter, but sometimes it's wasted without empathy. If we lead with
Mm,
empathy first, we can make our kindness better. Another example, I had a technician who was helping me as a science teacher, at Christmas. I bought him a bottle of wine. Said, Ahmed, here you go. Thank you so much. You saved my skin so much because I was always late with my. I'd be like, oh, I've got a class practical next, and I haven't sent in my requests to you to get it organised. And he'd be like, don't worry, Ed, I can do it. Always had my back. Bought him a bottle of wine. He's Muslim, doesn't celebrate Christmas,
Right.
doesn't drink wine.
Right.
Received it great. We laughed about it, but
Yeah.
had I bought a box of chocolates, checked they were
Mm.
gelatin free and that they were halal and he could have them. I said, look, Ahmed, have a great break.
Hmm.
Thank you so much for your help. I've got these chocolates. By the way, I've checked that, there's
Yeah.
no pork gelatin or anything or stuff like that in it that you can't eat. I just really appreciate your help. That tweak in just
Right.
the delivery of the kindness that I want to give wouldn't have taken me any. Sometimes it does take more time, but that situation wouldn't have probably saved me a couple of quid as well, I would say. And would have been received in a way, oh my god, Ed gets me. Like he's
Mm.
not from my culture, but he gets me.
Or
And I
he
think that,
wants to get me. There's a
or
there's
he
a
wants to get me.
willingness.
There is a
Yeah.
real
Yeah.
attempt there. And I think that's the important thing as well,
Mm.
attempting to connect and attempting to get people's culture.
Because we're not always going to get it right, I guess. And that's okay, I suppose, because you can't always, but
Yeah.
there's that intention behind it.
And it's why we also don't use that phrase. I think it's really useful for really young kids,
Hmm.
but walking in someone else's shoes
Right.
in our society and culture today doesn't make sense.
Mm.
UK diversity has more than doubled in 20 years.
Mm.
So if you look at UK census data, every neighbor, what they call neighborhood diversity, has doubled across the whole of the UK.
Wow.
In some places, there's a place, Boston in Lincolnshire, it's 10 times the amount in 20 years. That's not even,
Huge
I
shift.
think that's just one generation,
Yeah,
right?
in a short space of time.
Huge shift.
Yeah.
And what that brings is difference in culture,
Hmm.
in religion, in beliefs, in way people were raised, languages. And that's not a bad thing. But we know that when we have too much change in a short amount of time,
Mm.
it
People
creates
can't cope.
friction.
Yeah.
It creates friction. And what we need to do is learn to navigate that. How do we navigate that? Skill of empathy,
Mm.
which is why we're not teaching it. It can be taught, but we're not teaching it. We're not developing it. A lot of it's to do with lack of time
Yeah.
or lack of effort sometimes, or just even understanding that it's a simple thing to do. It's just a way of thinking. It's that emotional intelligence building as well. This
Mm.
again, it's multifaceted and it's nuanced. And sometimes it's Friday night and you are tired and you don't want to empathize, and that's fine as
Yeah.
well. It's like also understanding yourself and where you are.
Mm. I was
So
going to say that, yeah, like because that to me, as you've been talking about empathy, I keep coming back to that, and I guess that's my perspective with the spark and this drive to help, particularly children and young people, but really all of us to understand ourselves and build that self relationship. And I guess I wonder whether, is that the foundation? Do you have to have the time, the ability to self-reflect, to know who you are, to empathize with yourself in some way before you can do that
yeah,
with
I
others?
mean, I should hire you, Nikki, because that is our that is our
Not going to
framework.
change the
So
world.
so we have I've started to call it a 3E model because it's
Hmm.
just easy, but we have empathy for myself, empathy
Yes.
for others, and then
Nice.
empathy in action. And this is
Love
the
it.
framework that we've kind of researched and has shown to help improve behavior, increase self-esteem. So
Hmm.
understanding yourself, it sounds like, I think there's a people won't be able to see this, but I've got one hand on the left and one hand on the right. And the one hand on the left is showing, you know, this is where we start. And if I speak to people, I say, oh, empathy. And they go, yes, amazing. We need it.
Yeah.
And if you look forward into the future, you're like, yes, we need this skill
Hmm.
and it's really important. And there's a gap in the middle, which is like, okay, how do you develop it? Or how do you actually develop that skill?
Yeah.
And part of it is this framework, which is empathy for myself. So that is understanding your own past experiences
Yeah.
and how they therefore impact everything that you see about the world today. Is there's a perspective that you have that's made up of all of your past experiences. Understanding your religion, your culture, where you're
Mhm.
born. I always have this argument with my dad. My dad's Irish, my mum's Scottish, Catholic family, and I say, well, Dad, if I was born in Iran, I'd be Muslim. It's
Yeah.
like, no, 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 no. Da, 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 da. And I'm like, no, I would. I just would. You would be as well. And we have this argument all. about to go on holiday next week, so we'll probably have
Oh,
it again.
you better not have that
Um,
argument now.
yeah, and it's just like understanding where you come from, who you are,
It
what you
shapes
like,
us.
your
Yeah.
shapes you, and that then allows you when you hear someone else's experience. So when we move into empathy for others,
Mm.
which is how people think of empathy, they immediately go to empathy for other people.
Yes.
You actually allowed to go, okay, I'm listening to this person. I think what everything that's coming out of their mouth is absolute rubbish.
Mm.
And then if you just listen, go back to yourself and go, okay, why do I think that? Well, I'm from a different place.
Mm.
I don't believe in their religion. I don't believe in their God. And if you remove that bit and just actually, that is what active listening is. How many times do we hear, listen actively, active listening? No one knows actually what that means. Like, what actually is that?
Just
Like,
sounds good. Yeah.
just pay more attention.
Right.
It just sounds good. I'll tell you what active listening is. It's removing yourself
Yes.
and your thoughts and your immediate opinions and judgments from what someone else is saying. It's not to like say you're discarding them, but you're
Mm.
just parking them for a minute so you can
Yes.
actually hear what they're saying. And you might be going, I disagree with that. I disagree with that. But it doesn't matter. What are they saying? And then you
Mm.
find out why are they saying it, or why are they acting that way, or what's made them. And that is genuine, true curiosity.
I
And
love
if you
that. Mm.
get that, you can then, when you move into empathy and action,
Right.
you actually make, if you decide to do that, and again, that's a choice, but if you decide to take some action, then you make a better conscious choice. So if
Yeah.
I move that back to an example, I see a man that's homeless. I think about myself, I'm not homeless. And what would I like if I was homeless? I would like a chicken sandwich. Hang on, I'm not the person sat down there.
Right.
Move the chicken salad sandwich or whatever it is. I actually even like chicken salad. I don't know why I said that. But chicken sandwich.
Noted.
Um, and then I go, well, what does he? And then I ask him a question. Hey, mate, just about to go into the shop. People always say to me, or people used to say to me, they said, "What if they ask for the whole shop?" I said, "They won't." And if they do,
People
you just
don't
say,
know.
I've got a couple of quid.
Yeah.
What would you like?" And then they
Yeah.
might say, oh, "I'd love a beer." I go, "I'm not going to buy you a beer." Or if you want to, you can still do that as well. But like, just stay true to like what you want to do.
Mm.
But you just ask them. He then says, "Oh, I'd like this," or "I'd like that." Then you go into the shop and you've put empathy into action in a way that has essentially incorporated that framework,
Yeah. And it's
and it's taken
meaningful.
seconds,
Mm.
but it's changed the course of that.
Yeah.
Also, that person has had an interaction,
Right. Because it's more than
which
just buying the item. Actually, it's that contact, isn't it? It's human to
they've
human.
been asked a question. They
Right.
haven't just been given
Well,
something like they
they've
are
been
an
looked
animal.
at in
Yeah,
somebody's on their level. There's eye
genuine care.
contact that, yeah. And
But
I think
that's our
mm,
model. Yeah,
it's really interesting, and it makes me think of like the part about that empathy for self at the beginning is, for me, what's coming to mind is like the setting aside of the ego and all the kind of belief systems that we have and all of that stuff that you talked about, because of where we've been brought up and the culture that we, it's about being aware of that, isn't it? Because actually, if I'm not aware of those programs that are running underneath my day-to-day life, then I can't consciously set that aside. And I love the way that you said that actually empathy and action is a conscious choice then, because that to me is essential. It's like bringing that intent. There's an awareness there, and that is that deeper listening. I think that active listening. It's like listening with intent from a deeper place or a higher place or whatever you want to call it. So it's not just listening through the lens of all my old beliefs and my ego and whatever it is, whatever language you want to use. I think that's really interesting.
yeah. Listening to understand rather than listening
Mm,
to respond, which I think is key.
yeah.
And again, you think about, we all do it. We all naturally love to put ourselves at the center of our worlds and conversations. So if you work in an office and someone goes, "Oh, how was your weekend?" "Yeah, we went to this," and you're listening to someone, they go, "We went to this restaurant." People, but "Oh, we went there. We went there the other week. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
wasn't it great?" Blah, blah, blah. People,
Yeah.
we love to like story top. I always call story,
Mm.
and we'll all know someone who is like a story topper. So
Oh yeah, 100%.
you went on holiday somewhere, you visited somewhere, and you went for 2 days, but they went for 4. So they,
And they had better
so
weather.
and they had better weather,
First
and
class.
yeah, exactly. Oh, you didn't get an upgrade on your flights? Oh, that's funny. We did. So
It's so true.
we all love to put ourselves at the
Mm.
center of the worlds and conversations, and
Yeah.
it's navigate. It is a constant navigation
Yeah. And
of
reflection,
people
isn't
and
it?
relationships, and
Mm.
that's why empathy is so hard. And yeah, it gets called a soft skill, which I
Oh my
hate.
gosh, that's yeah,
So we call
absolutely
them
not.
human skills. And what is going to be the most important thing moving forward in a world of tech and AI?
Mm,
Human skills. The World Economic Forum puts out every 3 years, and they did it last time. They did it in 2023. Top 10 skills for the future. Empathy is there, and actually there was 6 other ones amongst the 10
mhm.
that all relate to empathy. So it's like communication, and
Yeah,
because if you're hiring, you've got now tech to do a lot of stuff that would have been repetitive
yeah.
tasks, and you need people to be able to problem solve, be creative, get on with other people, navigate time zones and relationships with people from different cultures now,
Mm,
because we're in global teams. And
exactly. Yeah.
even if you work on your own, you'll connect with people across the world that are doing different things. So it's just, I could talk about empathy all day.
But it's so important, isn't it? You're right. And I was having a conversation on another one of the Changemaker podcast shows with an educator, Andy, and we were having this exact conversation about how schooling is rapidly going to change, and yet we're sort of doubling down on what we know, and let's just continue to do things in the same way. But actually, if we bring in more technology into schooling, into the workplace, we know it's happening. It's already happening. It's only going to ramp up, and probably very, very quickly, and our heads will be spinning. But the fact is, then we're going to have something else in our back pocket. And for me, I think it's those human skills, like you say, it's to be more human rather than to try and be like technology. And yet,
Mm,
apart from the work that you're doing, I think that there seems to be a real lack of focus on this in terms of preparing the next generation. But actually, we as adults need to be there in order to help our
yeah.
children. And there's a gap there, I think, which is why the work that you're doing with empathy work, Empathy Week, I think is so important. Tell us more about the program and how it works with schools and how schools can get involved.
Yeah, amazing. So we've kind of reshifted, had to reshift business model in the past sort of year and a half, but now Empathy Studios is sort of our umbrella organization.
Hmm.
So we do filmmaking, we do education, and we have our empathy program, which comes out in September. So every year we produce 5 film program that is then age differentiated. So it's a whole school approach to building the skill of empathy. So from ages 5 to 18, and it's a whole term's worth of films and a supporting lessons that then go into that. So the idea behind this is that if a school takes part in the empathy program every year of a student's life, so if you go in at 5 years old and you come out at 18, you will have experienced and watched 65 different people's life stories, which doesn't sound a lot, because we're in the world of like millions and we talk about like big numbers all the time.
Mm,
But when I talk about the fact that we've made films about James, who has Down syndrome, talks about, being himself, and then Lippo talks about the choice to wear her headscarf and how she was like
mm,
experienced Islamophobia. We've got Danny, who's a chef in Mexico, who talks about sustainability, and you literally see her pull like cabbages out of the earth, but then also talks about the fact she's got an eating disorder, which obviously is only in the older version of
mm.
films. You've got Moni, who talks about music and female representation in music. You've got Chiran in Nepal, who's a blind massage therapist and talks about how he sees himself as a VIP to life because actually he experiences it in a completely different way
Wow.
to other people and he's never been able to see in his life. Like that's, I think I've just named 6 people. Imagine 65.
Mm.
I mean, we're on like
Beautiful.
versions 25 by now. And don't get me wrong, the best experience would be your children, your students meet them in real life
Yeah.
and get to see their life. But we can't fly out. Maybe one year, one day we have Empathy Week Airlines, or Empathy Program Airlines, and we fly loads of kids out. But film, that's what comes back to what I said at the start. Film is
Yeah.
just, you can get from 0 to 100 in 2 minutes. So if you want a deep conversation about something,
Mm,
and what we've learned over the years of running this program is that students then have one of 2 things. They either see a little bit of themselves in the person and therefore have the confidence to say, oh, I've experienced a bit of that. I've experienced microaggressions. I've experienced a bit of racism. Or my brother's got Down syndrome.
mm.
And then what happens is all the students start listening to the kids. And it's not even about the film anymore. It's about the other students. Or the teacher starts to talk about it. It's life. It's being human.
Yeah.
It's understanding each other. And then that means 2 weeks down the line, when something happens in class, you'd speak up for that child that's being bullied or being, because that's not cool, because actually I know more about that person
Mm,
and I know what they've been through. And if we all knew everything that we've been, I always say, everyone's, been through something, had something negative.
yeah.
It might not, you might not see it as bad because you've been through worse maybe, but whatever, everyone's been through something, and it allows, therefore, children to do it. And then from the other side, so the other side is the child might not see in the film anything that they reflect on, but yet now they've seen a completely new perspective.
Mm,
And that is the power of the empathy program. And then we have an empathy in action project that links onto that. Now, that is, schools now pay for that. There's a reduction of the fee for state schools, but it works out anywhere from £1 to £2 a child. And
that's
if you think about it, for
fantastic.
your whole school,
Yeah,
that's all of your kind of assemblies made for a whole term if
yeah.
you want it. And we know this works because we have Wellington College have come back for a fourth year, Reed Street Darlington come back for a fourth year, Graham Herschel Grammar School. Graham's the teacher at Herschel Grammar School. They're coming back for like a third year in a row. And schools don't part ways with, no one parts ways with monies unless this works. And we're trying to make it as affordable as possible. But the thing is, we make what I would like to say Netflix quality films.
Yeah.
This is not, I got so bored of showing kids films about stuff. This is bullying. This is bad. We don't
Yeah.
bully.
And
And
they
the
don't
kids see
connect
through it
with
as
it.
well.
Yeah,
They
they're
don't,
really
they see through it.
intelligent. Yeah.
So we entertain,
Mm,
we edutain, as I say,
yeah.
entertainment education mixed, and the kids love the films,
Mm,
and the teachers love the films, and they get so much out of it. Now that is our program that, now at any point in the year you can get and take part in and supported with, and we obviously do training as well as a side. But then we have our big Empathy Week festival, which puts like a
amazing.
massive smile on my face, because that is free for any school anywhere in the world. We're starting to really make traction with it as
Mm,
well, especially this coming into next year, because now we do like in-person events. Last year we had an Empathy Week live show. We had 350 primary kids screaming their heads
wow.
off in a theatre, talking about empathy, showing film. There was like
Right.
live acting, there was music, there was just loads of creativity around it. And kids then understanding what empathy means and going away with it being like, empathy's cool rather than don't
This is
bully.
something we're
Like,
forced to be listening to.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's online training for teachers. There
Nice.
is live primary assemblies for schools to tune into. There is on-demand speakers, and then we provide some film-based assemblies, a couple of snippets that give you an intake into what. Now, if you buy the program as well from Empathy Studios, the new content of Empathy Week is completely new, so
Yeah.
you're also getting value there. We're just trying to give so much value to this idea of the importance of the skill of empathy. And what we learned, 100% of teachers we surveyed after Empathy Week last year said they wanted to continue developing the skill of empathy,
That's
because
incredible.
it doesn't matter what you do as a school.
Mm,
All of your mission statements as a
right.
school will say something about creating future leaders of the world, future citizens of the world, a space where they connect with different cultures,
Mm,
where kindness is encouraged, where curiosity is encouraged. Empathy is the foundation of all of
mm,
this. If you have a restorative behavior practice at
yeah.
school, empathy is the foundation of that. It will be the foundation of most behavior policies, or should be. Yet you might not use the word empathy. So what we're doing is essentially trying to help. I was a teacher. I was there. I
Mm,
had tons of emails every day. I was managing behavior. I was trying to do the academic success. We're not trying to add on. We're actually trying to take away from the workload and the stress
mm.
by, here's some assemblies that's planned. All your school for a whole week has every
That's
form time
amazing.
activity
Yeah.
planned.
I mean,
You don't
that's
have to
worth
do anything.
worth the
Just
money
work.
in itself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's, and I'm just talking with Empathy Week. That's free, so you
That's
can get
free.
access to that.
Yes.
And then if you want to do the program, you can be part of that as well. But it's just, we have to build this. We have to get this into curriculum,
Yeah.
and it's not just. I'm not talking about our program or Empathy Week. I'm talking about emotional intelligence. I'm talking about empathy. I'm talking about human skills
Mm.
development, creativity. Why are we taking it away? Why
Oh,
are we
it's
taking
shocking.
sports away?
Yeah.
We
All
have to
these
get this
things are
in.
so
This is what
important.
makes us
Yeah. Human.
tick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And actually, it's hard to say now because we're so used to the world that we have, but because of all this technology and artificial intelligence and everything else, we just don't know what the future is going to look like. It could be so different. Some people are talking about the fact that, in the not too distant future, humans might not even need to work in the way that we do now. So where are we going to find meaning? Where are we going to find connection? What's going to be important? What are we going to do with our time? Well, I'd like to think that we won't just be zombies sitting around just consuming stuff, but actually we'll come back to the inherent humanness and the importance of community and growing things and creativity and imagination and play and all those things that actually, as you say, have been pushed out of the curriculum of childhood even. Um,
Mm.
and I think it's so beautiful that you're using film as the one of the main vehicles for this because, as you said right at the beginning, our kids, all of us, we're bombarded by stuff constantly. Social media, Netflix, TV, it's just, but so much of it, it's not intentional, it's not conscious, it's actually very kind of what I would call kind of low vibrational stuff. It's very negative, it's this full of drama, there's violence, and you still absorb that as if by osmosis, just as you do when you watch one of your films, and you kind of probably you can see the children moving up a level in some way, kind of energetically, I
Yeah,
guess. Yeah, you
I've
can
stood in a
literally see it.
class. I've stood in a class at the back, and they've not known that I'm
Mm,
anything to do. They just think I'm a school visitor. Um, this was at Fulham a couple of years ago. Actually, I think it was after the sort of second program, and the child actually stood like raised up slowly, stood up because they were
right,
at the back of the
right.
class and they wanted to see better. And I was like, that was one of the moments when, like, as an
Yeah,
entrepreneur, you're constantly in doubt of
of
everything.
course.
Um, and then that was one of the click moments where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm onto something.
Yeah,
Like, there's a child, like a boy, teenage boy, who's just
right.
raised up and stood up, and he's not worried about his peers. He's just looking because he wants to
Mm,
see the screen better.
mm,
And that's when I'm like, oh my gosh, he's hooked. He's engaged. Film works. And film is a Trojan horse.
that's
It's a
interesting.
Trojan horse for getting the messages that you want to get across. Art, we are losing art.
Yeah.
Art is the way that we deal with joy, with pain. It's the way we deal with all of our emotions. It's actually, there's a song, Tom Mish. He's like a sort of South London guitarist sort of person, but one of his songs is like Before Paris. It's right at the start of his album, and he's interviewing like a guy, or he's got a sound recording of a guy that's on the street, probably in New York or in America. And I listen to this all the time because it's very powerful. And he basically says, you've got to do what you want to do, but he says art is a reflection of society, or where
Mm,
society's at, and we're losing, like, everything we do in our spare time relates to art pretty much, or creativity. Even
that's
if you go to a
interesting.
even if you go
Yeah.
to a restaurant, you're going there because the food is better than what you could
Yeah.
produce at home.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
You're not paying for a worse meal. You're paying
Let's
for
hope
a
not.
and that is art.
Mm,
Creating food in a way is
yeah.
art. Music, going to shows is art. Film,
Yeah.
art. Everything art. And yet we're losing that. And it's just, I just think it's, yeah, film is so powerful. I mean, it sounds a bit weird, but like I cry at my own films, making my own films,
Perfect.
because
Yeah.
I'm so sort of like invested. But I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, I feel that moment. Or now, you like, I'm trying to not just
Right.
build a storyline. I'm trying to also build the audience's emotions to
Mm.
understand what is important at that time.
And
And I
that's
think you can
so
hide those
beautiful.
messages in it.
Yeah. It's just natural though, isn't it? And that to me is the spark. You feel it as well as
Mm.
experience it. And it's that inherent connection to yourself, to the other, to the world. And yet it's so easily overlooked, isn't it? But the work that you're doing, I can't stress enough. I was so looking forward to this conversation because I just think, one, it's so important, but two, it's just so unique as well. Unfortunately, really, because it'd be great if we had a you in every country doing all this work, but right now maybe we don't. So, I'm just so pleased that we've been able to talk about this and hopefully kind of share it a little bit further and let's get into every school, just spread that word. I
That'd be
mean,
amazing.
I don't know if you can cope with the influx, but good problems to have, I guess.
Yeah, we can
Yeah,
definitely cope with
you
the
can cope.
influx.
Yeah.
Please, please, if it but no, if anyone is listening and just wants
Mm,
to talk, or wants to, if they're a teacher or they're a parent, please do pass it on to your
yeah.
school. I mean, obviously it'd be amazing to do the program. That's what kind of keeps us alive, but also has the most impact.
Mhm.
But my real call to action is just get your school or local school involved with Empathy Week,
Yeah. And
because
when
that's a great way in. And this coming year is 10th to the 14th of March
10th to 14th
2025.
of March.
Yeah,
Perfect.
so it's a way away, so there's time.
There's time. And just got a couple of questions for you to kind of close out our conversations, questions that I ask everybody. So the first one is, what's the one thing you wish you'd known at an earlier age, which would have helped you on your journey?
Oh gosh. Oh, I'm
It's a
usually
big,
asking the questions. I'm usually the interviewer.
it's a big question, I know.
I think just do it, just make stuff
Yeah.
because that keeps you back from a lot of things. And I would have probably explored making films maybe sooner, for example. But I
Mm.
think like I obviously to get to this point, I have got over what people think. But whatever it is you want to do, and it doesn't have to be lead into a business or anything like that. I
Mm.
started this off as a project, so just do something that you think is good for the world, good for you, and go ahead and just try it.
Yeah. See where it goes. It's following that joy, isn't it? That
Mm,
excitement. And if you could ignite one lasting change in the world, what would it be?
you're going to be shocked at this one. That people would have a
Mm.
higher level of skill of empathy
Yeah,
because I think it would change everything for the better.
it would. It would. And you're doing it, which is amazing. So finally, where can people follow your journey and learn about more about you and the work that you're doing?
Gosh, so yeah, my name is Ed Kerwan, so Kirwan is my surname. So that's kind of my personal handle on everything. I say everything. I'm basically on Instagram and I'm on TikTok. I haven't really used it. I just got the handle. And LinkedIn is where I post
Yeah.
most about what I do and my journey and what's happening. Because I think it's kind of the best platform for that. And then in terms of our website, so we have empathystudios.com and we also have empathy-week.com. So those are the two websites where people can yeah, connect, see, get involved. There's a free film straight away on Empathy Studios. It's of Tendi, a mountain Sherpa. He's summited Everest now
Wow.
14 times at this time
Oh
of
my
filming,
gosh.
16 times now. He's one of the top climbers in the world. He is incredible. So you can go and watch that on the homepage and actually get some free resources and trial and see what it's like. And then Empathy Week is, again, it's free. And yeah, just hope you can be involved and
Mm.
please reach out.
Yeah, amazing. And I'll put those links in the show notes as well. And, even if you're not a teacher or even a parent, everyone knows somebody who's got kids. Please just spread the word. I think that's so important. Like, yeah, make this your
Yeah.
biggest year ever. And I'm just so honored to have had this time with you to learn about the work that you're doing. I'm constantly inspired by change makers like you who are just, yeah, following that passion, doing something good in the world, making a difference. And together, all those things are sparking something really big. And like you said right at the beginning, all that we see is often very negative, but actually, if we strip all that away, there's so much good happening. So thank you so much for being with us. It's been an absolute pleasure. And come back and tell us more about what you're doing when you've taken over the world. You're in every school.
Oh, man, I will definitely will keep you updated. I hope
Yeah.
that's a reality. I hope that we can get into every school and somewhat, even if it's just
Mm.
Empathy Week, because yeah, I've seen the impact it's having, and now I'm like, this has to happen. This has to change. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
Bye.